when you get your grapes, just put them all in your first cup. All right, so, hi. Okay, so just with a show of hands, how many people in here are wine drinkers? Yeah, all right. Has anybody ever made wine before, either at home or in a winery? No? Okay. It's actually pretty, I don't want to say simple, but it's not as complex as a lot of people think it is. So, that being said, it all starts in the vineyard. The wine grower or the winemakers will go out into the vineyard and they'll taste all the grapes and they'll chew on the seeds to make sure they got the right flavor. They want to make sure they're aged to the right point on the vines. It's normally during August or September, and this is either called harvest or you'll hear it called crush, which is another word for the harvest season. And then they put them in these big, huge crates, like you can see here, and they truck them on out to the winery, and that's where all the magic starts. This is really exciting when it happens. So, when you get to the winery, the first thing, okay, well, that's a picture of a destemmer. I don't know why apparently it doesn't work on this computer, so I apologize for that. I can describe it to you. A destemmer is basically this big, huge machine that you put the grapes in. I can show you hopefully the next.
Fax pictures don't transfer over to PC.
Yeah, bummer. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you. Well, anyway, basically what a destemmer is, it's this big machine, and it has these kind of coils at the top of it, and you put the grapes up on forklifts, and you dump them into the machine, and the coils start moving. And what they do is they take the stems off the grapes, and in that process, they also kind of crush them a little bit. Some wineries will actually crush their grapes. They'll put them in a crusher, or they'll crush them themselves, depending on how they want to do it. Other wineries will just use a destemmer, which crushes them a little bit as it destems them. And so what happens is it goes through, these coils, and it comes down, and one of the wine, or other people that work, and also the winemaker's job, is to be in these bins and be there picking out any of these extra stems that you see. And they kind of look like, when you have the stems on wine grapes, they kind of look like jacks, like if you ever played jacks when you were a kid. And so you have to pick out the jacks, they'll call them jacks sometimes too. And you have these like grapes pouring down your head, you're picking out the jacks, you're getting really dirty, and it's like really awesome. So after the destemming process, the grapes start the fermentation process, where they're either placed into stainless steel bins, like you can see here, or plastic tea bins, which I'll show you in the next slide, hopefully, if it works. It's at this point that you can kind of tell the difference between when you're going to make red wine or white wine, because with red wine, you actually keep the seeds and the skins in with the grapes when you put them in there, so that you can get all the flavor, the tannins, and everything like that. Tannin is kind of that peppery taste you get on the back of your tongue when you're tasting like a red wine. Whereas with the white ones, you don't. When you're making white wine, you don't put the seeds and the skins in there with it. So, because when you open up a grape, you can tell that on the inside of a grape, they're all the same color. So that being said, I want everyone to take your spoon. Hopefully everyone should have a spoon. And take your grapes in your #1 cup and crush them up as much as you can. And these are going to act as your fermentation tanks for this time being. Oh, okay, so unfortunately this picture didn't come out. 2 to 3 times a day the winemaker does what's called a touchdown, where he takes this thing that basically looks like a big potato masher. It's about yay big with a big stick on the end of it, and he'll stand on top of the plastic tea bins, which are basically these big plastic bins, and he or she will mix up the wine. What you're doing is you're not crushing it during that stage. You're try to get as much juice out as you can. Unfortunately, they're not without having wine grapes.
Where's that juicer at?
I know. Yeah. I know, right? I should have collaborated. So he does a touchdown, and what the touchdown is made to do is kind of mix up the juices with the seeds and the skins to get all those flavors in there with it. And it also can kind of break down the complexity of the grape a little bit. Oh, I'm really sorry that my picture's not coming out right. Okay, so let me know when you guys are done. I'll wait till I stop hearing the clicking. You're not going to be able to get, unfortunately, a lot of juice out of these. But I'll give you a cool little tidbit while you're doing this. The cool thing about wine grapes versus table grapes is wine grapes will take on the flavor of anything you plant them by. So if you plant them by like a rose garden, you'll get a lot of rose flavor in the grapes. If you plant them by blackberries, I saw a vineyard once that was planted by a cemetery. So I don't know. It's really possible. I don't know. But okay, yeah. Okay, so you're now going to use your #2 cup and your #3 cup. And we're going on to the wine press stage. So you're going to take your grapes from your #1 cup and you're going to pour them in your #2 cup while holding it over your #3 cup, in the hopes of getting some of that juice, possibly, to go into your #3 cup when it's acting as your barrel. Because what you're doing is you're kind of doing what a wine press would do, which is basically this big sifter where you put the juice in there and it will sift out all the extra stuff that's in there that you don't want in there. Sometimes winemakers will put it back into a fermenter for a little while, just to get the rest of the debris from the bottom. Other than that, they'll go into barrels. Ah, that's mine too. Good. So your number three glass is going to be acting as your barrel. So what happens when you put juices from the fermenters into the barrels and from the press into barrels is they basically take this big long tube and they put it into the fermenter or into the press and they pump it out into these barrels. And so typically wine will stay in a barrel for 12 to 24 months depending on the wine. During the barrel aging process you rack the wines, which means you take that same section and you take the wine out of one and put it into another barrel just so you can sift out all the residue that's at the bottom of the first barrel. So here's a picture of some barrels, because I like barrels. And then some of the things, there's a lot of things you have to do when you're making wine. You can't just leave the wine sitting there. You never know what's going to happen to it. It could get crazy alcohol-y, it could get crazy acidic, it could get really sugary. So there's a couple different things you need to test for. pH is one of those things. pH, like you learned in science class, is testing the acidity or basicity of a substance. And the way you do that when you're testing wine is you take this little test tube and you put just a little bit of wine in the bottom. And you take a little tablet that's made specifically to test pH, and you drop that in there, and it will fizzle and it will turn, whatever color to tell you what the pH is. And you hold it up next to the chart, and it will tell you what the pH is. And the typical pH level that you want for table wines is between 3.3 and 3.7. Another thing you want to test is degrees Brix, and that's what this picture is. There's two different ways to test degrees Brix, and basically what degrees Brix are is the sugar content of the wine. And you want to test that because you want to see the sugar content is going to affect the alcohol content and just the general flavor. So hydrometer, which is what you see in that picture, is basically that you put this tube and you put this little instrument in there and it bounces around and it'll stop at a certain point and it will tell you what the degrees Brix are. There's also this really cool thing called a refractometer, and it's basically about yay long, and you have to go outside and you take a little juice and you drip it in there and you look up into the sun, and it will have inside of the refractometer, inside the scope, there's a little measuring device that tells you exactly how much sugar is in there, so that's kind of cool. Another thing to test is malolactic fermentation, and what that is it's kind of a, I can't think of the word, but it's basically when bacteria will break down the wine and turn it from malic acid, which is like the acid you find in an apple, kind of like that tart, tangy flavor, into lactic acid, which is more of a like milky, creamy one. This happens more with red wines than with white wines, but sometimes people will do it with white wines depending on the flavor they're trying to get. And alcohol content is my favorite because you use this really cool thing called an ebullirometer. So remember that ebullirometer, okay? So remember that one. And basically, to measure the alcohol content, you're going to measure the boiling point of the liquid. And so you have to put it in this ebullirometer and it boils, and you have this little chart that you match it up with, and it will tell you what the alcohol content is. So those are all the things you want to do. pH, malolactic fermentation, and alcohol content, you normally do those while they're in the barrels. And degrees Brix, as you can see here, they're measuring it. And that's a picture of a T-bin. You can kind of see around the edge of it. They're measuring it while it's in the T-bin. Because that kind of will tell you what the alcohol content is going to be later on.